Hello there, welcome back to my YouTube channel Bachelor and Master English. Today I'm discussing a poem entitled I Wander Lonely as a Cloud by William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth, born in Cumbria, England, began writing poetry in grammar school. Before graduating from college, he went on a walking tour of Europe, which deepened his love for nature and his sympathy for the common man, both major themes in his poetry. Wordsworth is best known for lyrical ballads published in 1798. It was co-written with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and his autobiographical poem, The Prelude, a romantic epic on growth of poet's mind. Imagination has been the source of Wordsworth poetry. Nature is seen as a guide or angel, a source of wisdom in every poetic work of Wordsworth. Simplicity, mysticism, spontaneity, and individual freedom forms the keynote of Wordsworth's poems. I Wander Lonely as a Cloud, often entitled Daffodils, is one of the very famous canonized poems by William Wordsworth. It is an appreciation of daffodils and contains 6 lines in 4 stanzas. And let's go with the summary of the poem. I Wander Lonely as a Cloud, often entitled Daffodils, is one of the very famous and canonized poem by William Wordsworth. It is a short poem that reminds us the moments when we standing on a low hill looking below a far stretched field covered by daffodils. In the poem, we have the poet or the speaker is compared with the wandering cloud high over valleys and hills. The wandering cloud is compared using a comparing word, edge. The person in the poem, persona, let's say, saw the crowd of golden daffodils beside the lake and beneath the trees. The daffodils were fluttering and dancing in the breeze. The poet uses the word star to compare with the daffodils, which were shining and twinkling on the Milky Way. The speaker saw 10,000 daffodils tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The speaker dances with the daffodils because he got much pleasure even in the solitude, seeing the daffodils, and his heart filled with pleasure. The waves beside them were also dancing, but they were not as beautiful as daffodils. There he could not do anything but be happy in such a jocund company of golden daffodils. He gazed and gazed, but did not realize what wealth the scene would bring him. The theme of the poem is even when you are by yourself and lonely and missing your friends, you can use your imagination to find new friends in the world around you. We often wonder whether the loneliness of the first stanza is similar or different from that solitude of the last stanza. In fact, they are not same, they are different. The poem was inspired by an event on 15th April 1802, in which Wordsworth, along with his sister Dorothy, came across a long belt of daffodils near Ullswater Lake in England, but he reduced the party to one. He tells the extent of his joy while he was actually among the daffodils, but the wealthier experience seems to have come from the emotions recollected in tranquility of his association of that jocund companion. Let's see the background of the poem, the composition, as I already mentioned here. William Wordsworth wrote daffodils on a stormy day in spring while walking along with his sister Dorothy near Ullswater Lake in England. Imagine the daffodils were dancing and invoking him to join and enjoy the breezy nature of the fields. Dorothy Wordsworth, the younger sister of William Wordsworth, found the poem so interesting that she took daffodils as the subject of her journal. The poem is 24 lines long, consisting 4 stanzas. Each stanza is a sestet, that is 6 lines long. It is formed with a quatrain, that is of 4 lines, followed by a couplet, that is of 2 lines, to form a sestet. Quatrains followed by a couplet. 4 lines followed by 2 lines. 6-line stanza of the poem follow a quatrain couplet rhyme scheme A B A B C C. Each line is metered in iambic tetrameter. Regarding the genre of poetry, I Wonder Lonely as a Cloud is a lyric. It is presenting the deep feelings and emotions of the poet rather than telling a story or presenting a witty observation. Tone. At the beginning of the poem, the mood of the poet is portrayed in the poem was loneliness and sadness, but at last he found nature's companion, that he mentions as jocund companion. Let's say hyperbole. This is overstatement of anything, and that is a typical figure of speech used in poetry or literary genre. The line 10,000 saw I at a glance is an exaggeration and a hyperbole. This describes the scene of 10,000 daffodils all together in a belt. They stretch in never-ending line. Another example of hyperbole. The flowers are spread everywhere in a line. Significance of vastness is explained here. And another figure of speech here is simile. And another figure of speech here is personification. This is the attributing human quality or giving human quality to inhuman or non-human being. William Wordsworth has used this figure of speech in the poem Daffodils. He has compared the cloud as lonely human in the very first line of the poem. At another place, the poet has compared the daffodils to a crowd of people. Comparison of daffodils with dancing human is another example of personification from this poem. And let's analyze and put commentary on the poem. This is a lyrical poem. It focuses on poet's response to the beauty of nature. And there is deep feelings and emotion, and no, not a story. The poem was inspired by an event on 15th April 1802, as already mentioned, and when Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy came across a long belt of daffodils. The first line often used as the title of the poem, I Wonder Lonely as a Cloud. The title of the poem is somehow misleading, as it suggests that there is something about the poet's loneliness in the poem, but the poem is all about the beauty of the daffodils and how they brought happiness to the poet. Anthologists like Palgrave entitled the poem as Daffodils in their collections. And the theme. I also mentioned the theme of the poem while discussing the summary. The main theme of the poem here is bliss or certain state of natural happiness. Other adjacent themes are collection of human emotions inspired by nature, happiness, memories, and past personal experience. The main theme of the poem is the bliss or certain state of natural happiness. Adjacent themes are man's relationship with nature, the effect memories have on people. The poem is about the state of bliss or inner happiness. The poet experiences thanks to a group of daffodils which impress him deeply. This inner state of bliss happens almost instantly, even if the poet started off lonely as a cloud. Wordsworth also shows his affinity for nature with the famous poem, I Wonder Lonely as a Cloud. The setting of the poem is very important as it helps develop the theme of the relationship between man and nature. The poet's blissful state is not triggered by any event but by being in nature. The importance of memories and the influence of the past is suggested in the last stanza of the poem, in which the poet finds himself in a habitual present, recollecting the image of the daffodils. Considered one of the most significant examples of romantic poetry, I Wander Lonely as a Cloud explores the relationship between nature and humanity. In doing so, it makes two key points. Firstly, it argues that humanity is not separate from nature, but rather part of it. And secondly, it says that the natural world and a strong bond with it is essential to human happiness. Though the reader might be fooled by the suggestion of solitude in the title, this is an optimistic poem with positive outlook on the world. This happiness is drawn from the speaker's interaction with nature, in turn encouraging the reader to appreciate the natural majesty that is all around them. This simple poem, one of the loveliest and most famous in the Wordsworth canon, revisits the familiar subjects of nature and memory, this time with a particularly simple spear musical eloquence. The plot is extremely simple, depicting the poet's wandering and his discovery of a field of daffodils by a lake, the memory of which pleases him and comforts him when he is lonely, bored, and restless. The characterization of certain occurrence of memory, the daffodils splash upon the inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, is psychologically acute. But the poem's most main brilliance lies in the river's personification of its early stanzas. The speaker is metaphorically compared to a natural object, a cloud. I wander lonely as a cloud that floats on high. And the daffodils are continually personified as human beings, dancing and tossing their heads in a crowd, a host. This technique implies an inherent unity between man and nature, making it one of Wordsworth's most basic and effective methods for instilling in the reader the feeling the poet so often describes himself as experiencing. The poem opens with a full evocation of poet's state of mind. Wordsworth is loitering alone, aimlessly in a state of loneliness and detachment. His brother John passed away and he was feeling alone, but he was in nature's company. The poem introduces the idea of loneliness in the first line, but the speaker is not really alone at all. The speaker is in the presence of a host of golden daffodils, whose delicate dancing in the wind has a long-lasting effect on speaker's mind, the poet's mind. The speaker the poet here compares himself to a natural element, a cloud. So, the human component of the poem is like nature, and the natural component is like humanity. They are in a word together. There is no separation between them. The poem Daffodils is a very simple but lovely and most famous poem in Wordsworth's panorama of poetry. It reminds us the familiar subject of Wordsworth poetry, that are memory and nature. Coleridge is in his critical examination of poetry of Wordsworth that he makes in chapter 22 of the Biographia Literaria, use lines from I Wander Lonely as a Cloud to demonstrate what he considered to be thoughts and images too great for the subject. The fault Coleridge called mental bombast. He distinguishes it from the verbal bombast. In fact, in his discussion of the fifth fault that he found in Wordsworth's word, a disproportion of thought to the circumstance and occasion, a fault Coleridge carefully clarified, of which none but a man of genius is capable. So, we see even Wordsworth's collaborator and very close friend also commented but positively his talent and in genuine capacity of composing poetry with recollecting emotions from tranquility is there. That is the capacity expressed in the poem here. The poet thinks himself is like the cloud in the sense of being free of movement, free to sense of dissolution. In lonely is a cloud. The simile here may also be intended to suggest the element of surprise in a discovery. The reader may observe in stanza 2 Wordsworth's use of the word dance reveals the relationship between the daffodils and the waves that move near them. Line 15 to the end, the movement becomes increasingly subjective. After stating the gladness of his association with the daffodils, a poet could not but be gay. He moves to a more psychological analysis of what he has experienced. The last stanza becomes the most important one in the poem, for which he reveals of the poet's own concept of workings of the imagination. So here, perhaps when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. Okay, that's the end of my discussion of I wander lonely as a cloud, sometimes referred as daffodils. So, how did you get my point? If you have any queries regarding your perception of my discussion, you can put your ideas in my comment box. And if you liked the discussion, please give a like. And thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your attention.